Ay. Hi, Zach. Just looking at you frightens me into remembering. So again, this is a lesson in how to look at things properly. So this woman was for 20 years stricken by, often they have these crazy viruses, and it affects the entire system, the nerves, the muscles, for 20 years. So then she contracted recently COVID. I don't know if the story is documented, but she contracted COVID. So the family said, that's it. Does it end? I mean, she's 20 years, she's suffering, and now COVID, they thought that the world's coming to an end. In the end, she went through a pretty difficult ordeal with COVID, and they weren't sure she would survive. At the end, she started to recover, and then they discovered, for the first time in 20 years, after she recovered from COVID, she walked off the bed. For 20 years, she didn't walk off the bed. Wow. And they realized that the COVID virus not only, attacked her body, but also killed the virus that had occupied her body. And when she regenerated and recovered from the actual COVID to her healthy part of the body, the previous virus disappeared and she was recovered. So it's remarkable. It's remarkable. You think sometimes, and then I saw a beautiful thought on that, and then I'm going to come to something else remarkable that I saw. Rabbi writes an amazing observation. There was someone, he records a story about someone who a few years ago flew from England to New York to attend a family wedding in Borough Park. When he landed in New York, he had a heart attack. It's a good reason for anyone to get a heart attack, landing in New York. And he was taken to the hospital and he spent 10 days. He didn't have insurance, he didn't go. I figured I'm only going for a day or two, coming back. Who thinks anything will happen? So the bill that he racked up because he had no insurance was $30,000. So he was upset. He turns to the Rabbi and he said, Rabbi, now you gave me a heart attack, I can accept. But at the same time, if I would have had a heart attack 8 hours earlier, while I was in England, socialized medicine, they might have killed him because it's socialized medicine, but he wouldn't have to pay, his insurance would cover it. It would be minimal. Why do you have to have a heart attack in New York of all places? Right? So he went to his family Rav, and the family Rav told him the following. He said like this, he said, Rav Shalom, his name was Rav Shalom, said, listen to me. Don't you realize when Rosh Hashanah was decreed, you have to spend $30,000 on medical expenses. Imagine if the heart attack had indeed occurred in England, and it wouldn't cost you that much. Do you know how sick you'd have to be to spend in England $30,000? Think of how much you had to endure in order to reach the sum of $30,000 on medical expenses. Imagine how many doctors you would have had to visit. Imagine how many operations you would have had to undergo. Imagine how much therapy you would have had to deal with. You would have had to been busy with health-related issues all year. Says instead, Rabbi Shalom had Rahmanas on you, $30,000, you get over, chick-chock, 10 days, you're back home. Rabbi concluded by quoting the Chazon Ish, who remarked that while everyone has to pass through this world, some go through it with crying and some go through laughing. If we can spend our lives laughing, why would we choose to cry? I think that's a good motto in life. So he said, the Chazon Ish told Rav Shmuel Grainman that the package that we receive in this world is given to us by Hashem. But we choose the glasses that we wear to view the package. With what color lens do we wish to view our world? We can view the 30,000 spent as a very black event. We can view it as a white and merciful. Amazing. Okay, that's interesting. Not always easy, but still, loses a lesson. That's one. Then today we learned the story. We learned the Gemara. We learned the Gemara that Ein Mazel Yisrael. That even though a person is born under a certain star or certain constellations, and there is influences, and there is a certain inclination, like the Gemara says, people who are born under the influence of Mars, for instance, have a disposition to bloody. So you can be an armed robber, you can be a terrorist, or you can be a moil or a sheikhet, or a bloodletter, a doctor, or something like that. So the Gemara says, and then each day a person's born different things. But then the Gemara says, Ein Mazel Yisrael, because tefillah and mitzvahs can do. And then the Gemara goes on to bring 3 stories of different events that the stargazers foretold terrible foreboding and actually death. And in the end, they all survived. And each of the stories, the sage that's involved in the story, one was Rabbi Kiva and his daughter, and others, and they said, what did you do? You must have had a schus. Inevitably, all the schusim had to do with doing an act of tzedakah chesed. And they did an act of chesed that day, that instead of the snake biting him, she put, Rabbi Kiva's daughter, she put some sort of ornament that had a pin into the wall, a crevice in the wall. She killed the snake. The next day, she pulled out the pin to put it on. The snake was there. Rabbi Kiva said, "What did you do that day?" He said, "I was at the chasna. There was a woman came to the chasna. It was her own chasna. No one gave him to eat. They were too busy having a party. She gave her portion, and that was it." So you see that when you do tzedakah or tefillah, of course, davening it also works. So I came across a story about someone I know, and this was written in two magazines actually, in two of the weekend things. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't, but it's a mitzvah lefarsim. Number one, the story is about Rav Zelig Shor. If you know his brother, who's Rabbi Shor, who's a chaplain in one of the hospitals in Hopkins, I think. He's a famous, long-standing chaplain, a remarkable, wonderful human being. His brother, who actually his son learned in TA when I was a principal there, and I had to do with him. And I remember then he was stricken with cancer. I had heard that he recovered, but I never knew the whole story. And so last week, or 2 weeks ago, there was a famous Manal. His name was Reb Shmuel Tzvi Berkowitz, who was a Manal in Cleveland for many years. And then recently in Passaic, he suddenly died. He died. He wasn't well. So story came about that no one knew about until just a week ago. And this is an amazing story. It's kedai to hear it. It's a mitzvah lefarsim. It goes like this. It says like this. He says, when Rabbi Shmuel Tzvi Berkowitz, they used to call him Shmuel, right? When Rabbi Shmuel Berkowitz, he lived in Cleveland. He served on the Chevy Kedisha. 23 years ago, he was summoned to perform a tahara at the funeral home. His associates in that day, one of them was Dr. Zelig Shor, who was a podiatrist, I believe, if I remember correctly, and Rashia Newman. None of them knew what the nifta, but all took note. The man had a tattoo. He had tattooed numbers on his arm. He was a survivor. The trio performed the tahara in complete silence in accordance with custom and left the funeral home. One detail niggled at Dr. Shor. The caution anxiety was confirmed when he soon received a call from Rabbi Berkowitz, who had also spoken with Shia and all three had perceived. When they did the tahara, they noticed that the guy didn't have a bris milah. He was never circumcised. Dr. Shor called his father, who was a rav and a mayel, and his instruction was to go perform a bris on the mace, but with glass, not with metal. I'm not sure why. Dr. Shor hurried with Rabbi Berkowitz back to the funeral home. I guess being that he was a doctor, he knew he wasn't so queasy to be able to do it. It was a corpse anyway, and he did it, and he took the arla with him to the forest to bury it in the woods. He says, that's what you do. The mayel, you're supposed to bury it in the ground. Afterward, when Dr. Shor dutifully reported also to his father, he says, no, you made a mistake. The arla is supposed to be placed in the right hand of the nifter. It will serve as an edus that he had a bris milah. So when Avram Avinu meets him at the gate of Shemayim and protects those who have been circumcised. Dr. Shor quickly called Rabbi Berkowitz, and they ran out to the forest to retrieve the arla. He had carried in a tissue, and the tissue got bloodied. So they noticed the tissue and they were able to find it, and they found it. And then they were told, they dropped it, they found it, and they went to the ark. And meanwhile, they ran into the middle of the funeral. This is a crazy story. They ran to the middle of the funeral. Everyone's sitting there, they're giving drushes. This Dr. Shor runs up to the coffin, and he lifts it up. He finds the guy's right hand. And obviously, no one knew exactly what was going on. And he put the arla in, he found his right hand and put it in. And the deed was done. And they kept the pact of silence on the matter until 6 years later, one morning. This is 6 years after this episode happened many years ago. Dr. Zelig Shor woke up paralyzed. And they took testing, and they realized he had a tumor in his brain and his spine, and they could offer no hope in the prognosis. It was only a matter of time. Shia Newman, the third member of the faithful Chevra Kedisha, he was there also. He approached Rabbi Berkowitz after davening Shabbos morning, and he spoke about what happened. He said, this Rav Shia said, we got to do something. He has a tremendous chus. Look what he did. Look what, they had a chus to this Holocaust survivor and to mal him after he died, and they put the milah in his right hand. And so they said, we have to do something. This is a true story. I mean, this is like documented, and we know the people involved. So here it goes. So what they do is they decided that they all had this in mind. They said, we'll go to Rabbi Gruma, who passed away just a few months before just 3 months ago. Rabbi Yisrael Gruma, who was a great guy in Cleveland. Rabbi Gruma was famously cautious, never answered a shiloh without looking things into it. And he told them to come after Shabbos. Rabbi Berkowitz, Shia Neiman entered Rabbi Gruma's office after Shabbos. They found him at his desk with the Kabbalah safe open before him, which he had transcribed the passage. He told the men to go to the Nifta's gravesite, take 2 branches in the hands. They would then to recite the lines he had written down in Lashon HaKodesh. I, Yisrael Chaim ben Chayefeged, as the Abbez of Cleveland, via my messengers Shmuel Tzvi ben Hendel Rachel and Yeshua Yechiel ben Miriam Hazel, hereby decree that you, and that was the mace, he says, Pliny ben Pliny, whatever his name was, go obtain a Yeshua for Ezriel Zel Chaim, that's Dr. Shua, who's living today, Dr. Shua, Zel Shua, ben Shendel Shener Hazel. After relaying this message, Rabbi Gruben told them the two men were to break the branch on the tombstone. So Shia Newman remembers the enthusiasm with which Reb Shmilu carried out the holy mission. He researched the location of the burial site. The next morning, he picked them up. Shia, they went to the cemetery. They took to the ranches. They fulfilled their shlichus, omitting no detail. Rabbi Burgers hurried to share the news with the Shua family. My wife told me that Shmilu came charging into the hospital, recounts Zelig Shua, 17 years later. The situation was grave, and no one was allowed in my room. He told my wife that a great schus of mine had been involved. He had gone with Shia to the kever of that man, and soon would all be celebrating as soon as I do. For Shia Newman, there was a chilling reminder last week, and he recovered. And Zelig Shua recovered. And for Shia Newman, it was a tragic, it's sort of a bittersweet end, because he wanted a post-side story. He was learning, and he was learning when he went. This whole thing, remembered the whole thing was, remembered was they were learning the sugi in Shabbos that talks about a baby that dies, you have to do milah. It led to a discussion of doing a bris on someone who was deceased. Remind me of that episode long ago. I thought of how Shmilu told me last year that we should look to have made it public, the story. Later that day, we received the tragic news of his patira. This Rabbi Berkowitz died before they had a chance to enlist the schus again for him too, because he was also involved. Amazing story. Yesh Mazel Yis, Ein Mazel Yisrael. You do an act of chesed, Hashem sends you an opportunity, and that can mamish change your mazel. An amazing story, true story. It was both written up in the Yated and in the Mishpacha magazine. It felt being that I was so excited to know about the story because I knew that he covered. I've seen him since, and Baruch Hashem. So that's the story. So you never know. Every opportunity comes your way, take it, because you never know when it can come into our favor to ward off whatever mazel we have. Because at the end of the day, it's never fatal. Nothing is fatal. It can always be changed. If we do tshuva, we do tzedakah, we do ma'asim tovim. We're approaching Elul. It's coming up, believe it or not. And next Thursday is Rosh Chodesh Elul. So chaperein your averis, because we have to start doing tshuva soon. And anyway, that's the story for today. And we started the Chizuk today at 7:40 for the rest of the week, and hopefully we will continue on that path. And thank you, Zach, again for making an appearance and reminding me with your fierce smile to always record. Okay. Zagabench, everyone. A good night.